Okay, councillors, you start the meeting, please. Good evening. I'm Councillor Paul Wilby, the Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. May I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and the members of the Democratic Service Team will assess the situation and give further instruction on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and the members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. I'd also like to advise members that should they need to should only address the meeting by way of the microphones and remind them to turn the microphones off when they have finished speaking. Okay. Moving on to apologies, we have apologies from Councillor Reardon and Councillor Trzaskowski. I believe we have substitutes.
Councillor Spingett for Councillor Trzaskowski.
Thank you.
Councillor Parfitt for Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, moving on to item 3, visiting members. Would you come forward and actually say what items you wish to speak on?
Thank you. Councillor Keeley, I'd like to speak on item 16, please. Thank you.
So, Councillor, can you say that again? Okay, moving on to item 4. Items withdrawn from the agenda. No items withdrawn. Okay, moving on to item 5. Date of the adjourned meeting will be held on Thursday, the 29th of August. Hoping we don't need to use it. Okay, item 6, urgent items. I intend to take any verbal updates or urgent items as they contain further information relating to matters considered at the meeting. I've also received a letter from Councillor Trzaskowski, which Councillor Springett is going to read out on his behalf. Okay, item 7, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? Councillor Jeffries.
Item, gosh, what number is it? 12. Obviously, as a Maidstone Borough Council submission, I don't believe any of the 5 cabinet members here have been involved in that, and given last time's precedent, I'm assuming we're all going to be able to sit and discuss it.
Yes, that should be okay, Councillor Jeffries. Okay, moving on to disclosures of lobbying. I will go around from the left, working my way around. So,
items 14 and 17.
I haven't been specifically lobbied on item 14, but I have got the letter that I got from Councillor Trzaskowski to read, so thank you.
17, Chairman.
17.
14.
17. 14 and 17.
I've been lobbied on an item which has yet to appear on the agenda.
the Jeffries.
Yeah, 14, 16, 17.
Items 16 and 17, Chairman.
And 14, 16 and 17. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Summergill, would you just turn your microphone off, please? Okay. Moving on then, item 9, to consider whether any item should be taken in private. Is it agreed that we proceed in public? Councillors, is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. Okay, item 10, minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of July 2024. Can I take this as a correct? Agreed, okay. Moving on then, any presentations of petitions tonight? Nope, no presentations of petitions. Moving swiftly on then, we go on to item 14. I called upon Kate Rodrigue to
Who's going to
Oh.
speak first?
Councillor.
Apologies, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. Bit cosy here tonight. Yeah, just some one strategic point, really. Back in the 1990s, when Councillor Spooner and I was starting off doing planning, you had your county structure plan, and it said something like, the countryside will be preserved for its own sake. So to a large degree, it was binary. In the countryside, the only permissions we would grant would be for something like an agricultural worker's dwelling, forestry worker, or more commonly infilling. And infilling was defined. Then there was the sort of raft of PPGs, and that principle started getting eroded. So in the current NPPF and previous iterations of the NPPF, there's nothing on infilling, but there's nothing on preserving the countryside for its own sake. Then with the last local plan, the key wording was development which causes harm in the countryside will be refused. And I take the blame for that because I thought it's quite easy to identify harm in the countryside because you have, if it's a new house, it's a new object, so the countryside is less open. That's most simple. Now the bar has come down further, whereby we haven't for many a year had a policy to say in the countryside it's unacceptable, because we regard the principle of development in the countryside as just unacceptable. So what we look at now, and Kate will go into the detail, is we look at significant harm. We certainly still, I don't want to be nihilistic about this, we certainly still value the countryside for its own sake, but the policy landscape has changed, I'd say, very significantly in recent times. So I just wanted members to be clear that the sort of binary days of in the urban area, yeah, that's okay, countryside, not okay, it's changed. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to the garden land of 1 Warm Lake Cottages, and whilst within the designated countryside, the site fronts onto Warm Lake Road and is enclosed by existing residential development on 3 sides, including a relatively large cul-de-sac development to the south. The site is not within flood zones 2 and 3, and extensive planning history makes it clear the area is not considered to be unsustainable in terms of location. This is the aerial showing the sort of relatively large cul-de-sac development to the south. Frozen. It's not working. There we go. Sorry. Okay, this is Warm Lake Road, the application site here. And just again, with pavilion view to the side there. This is the front of the site where the access is going to go. This is the site itself. And just note the cul-de-sac development to the behind there. And looking back along Warmlake Road towards the crossroads, the application site is just behind the tree there. In terms of the plans, this is the block plan here, showing the new dwelling. This is the design. This is it seen in the context of the street with the proposal dwelling there. So as the report sets out, the development would be set back from the road and very much read in the context of surrounding residential development without appearing over-dominant or visually awkward when viewed from any public vantage point. In particular, the scheme would positively reflect the scale, design, layout, plot size and building line of the two dwellings to the west. It would not adversely change the rhythm of the street scene, nor appear cramped. It would not result in the loss of any important views, and there is also the opportunity to improve the quality of landscaping on the site. Further to this, the submission sets out that surface water will be disposed of by way of soakaway, and this is not objectionable. So whilst it is understood that surrounding roads can sometimes flood, there is no evidence to suggest that surface water from this development itself could not be adequately dealt with on the site, ensuring flood risk would not increase elsewhere. The application is also considered to be acceptable in all other respects. So whilst it is acknowledged that the scheme would not accord with policy SP9 of the local plan review, in that there are no exception policies for such a development in this location, it is considered that the submission would not cause significant harm to the character and appearance of the surrounding area, as argued in the committee report. To ensure consistency in decision making, great weight is also given to a recent appeal decision that allowed a new dwelling on a more prominent plot less than 15 metres away from the development. On this basis, a recommendation of approval is made, subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I have Deborah Brown, the objector, please?
Good evening, members of the committee. Oops. We live in Pavilion View, which is next to the site that is supposed to be built on. Because the positioning of this development is sited set back on the plot, it would be visibly intrusive, create a dominant and oppressive environment to the detriment of neighbouring properties, causing a serious loss of privacy and overshadowing. It's a cramped plot, raised above the level of the lane. The fanciful building plan conveniently makes it look like the site is at road level. It is not. And if you parked a vehicle as shown in the drawing, it would cause an obstruction. The recent nursery development to the rear of us means we now have 7 new first floor windows overlooking us, 3 of which have a clear view into our bedrooms. How is it fair that this sets a precedent to have even less privacy from this new planning application? In the words of the owner of this garden development site, in reference to the objection to the nursery development, she said, "We feel more consideration is needed for homes already in place." We have more than our fair share of new developments within a stone's throw, with many more already having been passed sadly in what was a village countryside setting. This is one too many, which would not help a housing problem, only cause grief to neighbours who have already had new builds within yards of their homes, causing more flooding already. It's clearly an unnecessary overdevelopment. The site exit is extremely dangerous across a raised strip of highway land onto a 60-mile-an-hour narrow lane with no safe parking in the road. The driveway would be short and steep with limited exit visibility. Where the drive would exit, it floods regularly, as shown on the Kent Government website and images posted online. I have been given evidence of this history, and yet again, very recently, on the 15th of July, there was deep flooding causing the road to be closed due to serious flooding in the road and into the new build on the corner, which should never have been given permission due to this flooding. On this day, 6 properties could not get access to their homes, and the road was closed yet again. How this has been classed as being within flood zone 1 is ridiculous. We might not have rivers around us, but we clearly do flood regularly. We have critical damage problems. critical drainage problems. Another driveway coming down would exacerbate the flooding problem in the road, and near neighbouring properties on the lower level would be endangered even more than previously. Are the council prepared to take that responsibility after being warned? Please be kind enough to consider all these issues carefully. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I believe we have the applicant on the virtual Teams, Maxine Ryan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Hi, fabulous. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for letting me speak. I feel like I've satisfied everybody I was asked to satisfy. The highways, the ecological and tree officer, the planners. And as I understand it, those people have no objection. This is an infill plot. There is lots of development, as been said, around me. To the left, there was 18 houses. Directly behind is the 2 houses. One of the persons that have just spoken lives in one of those houses. There's 9 across the road in front of me, 3 to the right, and then there's the one that has been given planning opposite me. There's lots of things been said about overlooking, etc. There is no windows overlooking that side. The house is in line with the 2 houses that were built. Also, mention of the flooding. Unfortunately, the soakaway that is in the road isn't big enough for this road, and highways are addressing this in September and October. The road is closed for that to be resolved. It's nothing to do with, as I'm told by the experts, it's nothing to do with the houses that are there. So I'm hoping that you will see that I've tried to satisfy everyone that I've been asked to satisfy. I've followed the process as correctly as I can, and tried to be as meaningful as everybody around me. Hopefully you see that in my application. As I say, I've tried to pull a full application together with all of the approvals that are in place directly around this plot. Yeah, and that's really all I wanted to say, and just thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so moving on to members. Councillor Springer, I'll take you first as you're representing the council that called this in.
Thank you. Councillor Trablinsky has asked if I would read out this statement on his behalf. I would first state that I have been lobbied by both applicant and objector to this planning application. Having looked at all of the information and aspects of the application, I have sympathy with both parties, which is why I decided to call the case into the committee, as it really is not as simple as it seems and deserves debate. There are 2 aspects. First, overdevelopment of the area, and second, the proximity to a major crossroads. In order, this area has had a number of new developments over the last few years which have changed the nature of the location, and a number of older residents have complained to me about overdevelopment and infilling of natural habitats. The garden nursery next door is now a small estate, and there are 2 other new ones nearby. There is one more, which I understand is the 3rd to be erected in what was the rear garden of 1 Warmlake cottage. Where do we draw the line? On the other hand, will one more property make a difference now? Secondly, the nearby crossroads, which is very close, is a very busy place, and in my personal opinion, currently needs either a mini roundabout or a set of traffic lights, even without an additional property in close proximity. KCC would probably disagree, but they do not use it as frequently as I do. There is also flooding at the junction, which will only be exacerbated by a new hard tarmac driveway channeling water onto the road. Having said this, I understand that KCC have now withdrawn any concerns that they may have had and have no objections. The application would seem to be finely balanced, and I would like this committee to consider all aspects and come to an equitable decision for the parties concerned. Apologies for my absence. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add yourself, Councillor Springer?
I don't think so, really. I have so much sympathy with the neighbour that spoke. I've had houses built behind me, and I now have windows that look at me, and it's horrible. And I absolutely understand that. I think we're probably scuppered by the recent planning appeal decision for the property on the corner. So I personally, sadly, cannot think of any strong reasons to object to this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also very familiar with this particular locality because it's in my county division, and we have spent a lot of time looking at the crossroads. Unfortunately, it is not suitable for a roundabout. It is not suitable for traffic lights. That is impossible because of the space that's available. I also sat on the planning committee when the Warmlake Nursery came to committee, and I did actually vote against that because I was concerned about the impact on the area. And so I've never been particularly comfortable with the overdevelopment of this this site. On paper, when you look at it, it looks like a tiny infill, and so I can see why. And so I do agree with what everybody says. It is extremely nuanced, and it's finely balanced. But the road that it goes on to is a 60. I get a lot of concerns from drivers or residents, sorry, about the speed on that road. And just one other point, the crossroad has only just missed being in a crash cluster site. We actually thought it was going to be designated a crash cluster site in the recent set of data. So there are a number of accidents at that crossroads. It is, you know, a regular occurrence going along there and seeing quite nasty accident. So I am interested to hear what everybody else has got to say. I haven't sort of come down one side or another, but probably if I had to, on balance, I just think it is one too many in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, as a regulatory committee, the starting point has to be policy, and this is contrary to policy, and that's clear. I mean, I think it's what LPRS P9, you know, it's a development in the countryside. And then we look at the local implications and characteristics of this site. And I think this is what genuinely concerns me, in that we have seen some planned growth on the garden centre and on the Warmlake business estate. But we've also seen a lot of unplanned growth. I mean, the Oaks development was on appeal. The development at the southeast corner of the crossroads was another appeal for quite a big scheme that hasn't gone ahead yet, but there's a lot of trees have been taken out and so on. So I think that it's a kind of incremental impact on the open countryside. And I think Warmlake Road, where the further you head west, towards the Chart Sutton, it's real countryside. I mean, it's genuine countryside. So I think if we were to frame a grounds for refusal, it is the cumulative impact of intensification of development in this area, and it basically in the countryside, you've got spaces between development. You've got an irregular form of development. I just have concerns that the consolidation of filling in a gap stops this being the slightly kind of chaotic form that you get development in the countryside to something that's more urban, and so therefore it's an urbanizing impact, and a cumulative impact would be the basis for backing up why this is contrary to LPRS P9. But I will wait for the debate, but I'm not currently minded to support an infill development in this plot because I think development becomes too intense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Rob John wants to come back in. I just want to also ask about the appeal decision on the other site. Could we have some information about why we lost that appeal, so we've got some reference?
In terms of appeals, Kate will look at the detail, but there's been a number of appeals. It's definitely plural. And like some councillors have said, this committee, obviously made up of different people over the years, have clearly allowed a lot of development. As I said at the outset, I would argue that it's not contrary to policy. LPR SP9, I'll just call it SP9. I quote, development proposals in the countryside. So this is classed as a countryside simply because it's outside the village envelope of Sutton Valence. It's outside the urban boundary of Maidstone. So it is in the countryside. Development proposals in the countryside will not be permitted unless they accord with other policies in this plan. And this is the key for me, and will not result in significant harm chosen by this council, used to be just harm, but now significant harm, to the rural character and appearance of this area. The reason why I suspect this council has permitted many an application, including the very large one, which I think Councillor Parfitt really referred to, the former Warm Lake Nurseries, is because it has simply lost its rural character. I think if you travel to this area, unfortunately now, it is a mass of houses. So I think the rural character has been lost. Yes, it's one more, but I think it'd be extremely hard to argue that significant harm is being caused here. And in my opinion, the rural character has been very significantly eroded.
I'll take the officer first. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just to come back on the appeal decision, if you refer to paragraph 608 in the report, I've extracted extracts from the appeal decision, which I consider important. So the inspector concluded that it didn't cause harm to the character and appearance of the area. This was a decision taken at the time under the 2017 local plan. And obviously, as we've said, the new local plan now has lowered that bar to significant harm.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wish to bring up two very small details which are completely different scale, and I'm clear that I do not think that these are particularly relevant to the general thrust of the conversation that we've been having. I note that 606 on page 24 concludes with a welcome remark about the quality of the appearance of the dwelling will be improved through the insistence of a quarried ragstone plinth. That seems to me to be an asset in this application. But the thing that I particularly wish to contrast with that very sound architecturally and aesthetically minded view is page 29, item 13. It mentions secure bicycle storage on the site. For a minimum of one bicycle shall be provided and usable prior to first occupation. Hereby approved, it should be maintained as such thereafter. In the interests of sustainable development, it says. I would like to hear from officers, and I'm aware Mr. Jarman has spoken several times this evening. I'm aware we've had other expert colleagues with us, so I'm not making assumptions about that. Does that mean a shed in the back garden? Does it mean a metal cycle rack at the front of the garden, visible from the front of the property in this area? That would seem to me to be inappropriate. And by what means is it supposed to be inspected to be maintained as such thereafter? The quality of the requirement in 13, while generally I welcome it, seems to me open to well, ridiculed is the answer, is the word that pops into my head at the moment. But seriously, I'm looking forward just to steer on this relatively minor issue. But since it's here, I would like to hear some commentary about it, please.
Before I bring the officers back in, Councillor Summersgill and then Councillor Jeffries, and then I'll bring the officers back.
Yes, I've got a question on surface water on the site. Having noted that the parish council has a lack of information of plans for water runoff in an area that's flooded, and there doesn't seem to be a condition about surface water, just foul water. I've checked the geology of the site. It's very similar. It's the same as in Cox Heath and along the Heath Road, and shallow soakaways are often refused on those areas, and deeper soakaways are required. I just wonder if a condition for a soakage test should be applied on this application.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Somerville. Yeah, Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you. The one point I was going to raise was the Ragstone plinth, and for completely the opposite reasons to Councillor Thompson. I don't see any rationale for it, given that I don't think it exists in the ones next door. So as far as I could see from the photographs, so I just wonder why it's in there, given that Ragstone is a valuable and limited resource. However, the key point I wanted to raise, and I do have to concur with Mr. Jarman around the word significant. As much as I don't like infilling, I cannot see any significant harm here. And you know, the council, I didn't, but the council voted in the new local plan. I didn't want the word significant in there for exactly this reason, but it was put in there and it was agreed. And I cannot see this as significant harm by letting this go ahead. So I don't think we have a leg to stand on to turn it down.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Officers, if you come back and some answers to those questions.
On the soakaway, what's being proposed is a soakaway, but that's something building regs will deal with.
And in terms of the bike storage, yes, it can be a shed in the back garden. They tend to be very modest and not visible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spooner and then Councillor Springer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened very carefully to the debate so far. I was impressed with the public speaker. I can fully understand where she's coming from. I have every sympathy for the local residents. They have seen this area of our borough change quite dramatically over the last 20 years. We've had the redevelopment of the nursery site. We've had the Oaks development come through on appeal. There have been several other appeal decisions around the crossroads where we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply and the inspector granted consent. But in the cold light of day, we have to be objective. And this committee is charged with making technically justified and legally sound decisions on all the applications that come before it. And I look at this site, and as try as I may, I cannot see how it's going to cause severe harm to the countryside. It is surrounded by development. It's a classic infill plot. We have had a recent appeal decision on the other side of the road. This may be an application which we perhaps don't like. I don't like it particularly, but at the end of the day, we have to have a technically sound, legally binding decision made on it, which we can defend on appeal. And I cannot see how we could defend this on appeal, not bearing in mind the appeal decision just across the road. If anybody can come up with some reasons for refusal, let them do so and propose it be refused. But in the cold light of day, I'm happy to propose that we permit this application as per the order papers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do we have a second for that? Okay, Councillor Springer, as you indicated to talk as well, so.
It was just a very minor point. It was actually picking up on something Councillor Parfitt-Reid said. They can't put a mini roundabout on the junction and they can't put traffic lights on it. So if we start getting a huge accident statistic, where do we go? A flyover? I'm just wondering whether there is any room for this committee to purvey the concerns to KCC, that they've raised no objections, but this seems to be we're increasing traffic in an area with a junction that doesn't seem to have a solution going forward. So I just wondered, I don't know if there is a way we can take our concerns back to KCC, because they've got their usual head down the hole, no objections. And then in several years, there'll be, now what do we do? And I'd just like to throw that in the pot. Thank you.
So we have in the past put informatives on on the recommendations. Obviously, hearing Councillor Parfitt speak about the accidents down at the crossroads, I'd probably suggest that maybe we put informative about speed restriction going in to actually slow the traffic down, which obviously would then reduce the amount of accidents at the crossroads, possibly. Councillor Parfitt.
I was just going to say that the crossroads itself is 30, but where this house is positioned, that I think that comes out onto a 60. So it does go into a 30, and it has been explored on a number of occasions, extending that 30. But one of the reasons for not doing that was to avoid overdevelopment.
Well, I think that ship has passed, unfortunately. So if the proposer and the seconder wouldn't mind putting the informative on about the speed restriction being referred to KCC. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harwood, as you spoke against this and you said you were mindful to refuse it, do you have any counter to come back or?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is just the infilling and consolidation just further urbanises, and it's the edge of the development area. If this were on, if you like, the main road, on the Maidstone Road, I think, but the fact that it is on Warmlake Road, which is still rural, I think that is my concern. It's a thin end of a wedge. And that's the way I suggest that we could potentially argue that we don't want consolidation of gaps and we don't want any further spread along Warmlake Road, because that's where you start to impact upon genuine countryside. Whereas the ribbon development down the A274, I think, as has been said, the urbanisation is already there. I don't think Warmlake Road is similarly affected yet, but this will potentially compound that risk.
I think, unfortunately, we don't have the policies to support that at the moment. Obviously, going forward with the local plan review, we possibly will have the chance to amend these policies. But unfortunately, this is one that I agree with Councillor Spooner that everything on paper, actually, I have to agree with him and Councillor Springett. So as I've had no one actually proposed objection and a seconder, I will go to the vote for approval. Okay, so all those in favour? Those against? And those abstain? Okay, that is approved. Okay, moving on, councillors. Okay, on to item 17, page 56. Okay, downtown Victoria Leisure, Ashford Road, Amersham. And with the officer to introduce.
On cloud nine at this school and
sorry, John, could you mute your mic, please?
secondary school.
Thank you. The councillors, just bear with us. The officer's just rebooting the presentation. Okay, councillors, we're going to have to come back to item 17 Okay, so we're going to move on. Okay, maybe not. It does seem I'm cursed a little bit with technical issues and these meetings.
Sorry about that. I'm ready.
Councillors?
So this is the site of downtown Victoria's Leisure, Ashford O'Harriet, Kent, although it's technically in Lenham Parish. This is the aerial. The site is the start and is the western end of a cluster of development close to the Lenham Parish borders. Opposite is woodland, and to the west is farmland. This is the existing building, which is a sort of single-storey former nightclub building, originally a transport cafe, and enlarged over the years in a sort of ad hoc way. Very open frontage and a very wide frontage to the A20. This is the elevations of the existing building, and as you can see, a sort of mixture of styles and a sort of very ad hoc and piecemeal development over the time to create that former building. The redevelopment is to demolish the nightclub and erect 4 chalet bungalows, 1.5 stories, with a shared access point to the existing access to the site. And then the parking and manoeuvring is put in the centre of the site to leave scope for more soft frontage with landscaping. This is a street scene of the 2 plots proposed for the A20 itself. And these are the elevations of the plots at the rear, plot 1 and plot 2. So because the site has an existing building on it, notwithstanding it's in the countryside, it is brownfield land, and assessing the policies, LPR HOU1, which is the new brownfield land policy, it is considered to meet the tests. Currently there is a poor environmental quality for the existing building, and the redevelopment has a lower footprint, a lower bulk, and more scope for landscape screening to the frontage. So in conclusion, is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor John Britt for Lenham Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you regarding this proposal. You'll note that this is the latest in a series of plans for this redundant former site, which the Planning Committee has been asked to consider since Victoria's closed some years ago. Whilst it's clear that this current downsized proposal appears to meet the requirements for approval, I would ask you to pause and consider the wider consequences of allowing yet another rural brownfield and former commercial site to be turned over to housing. What we need in our rural area are opportunities for local employment. These provide prospects for local people to find jobs close to home and reduce the miles travelled to work along the already overstretched rural infrastructure. Anyone who's tried to navigate the A20 towards Junction 8 in the morning will testify to the trial that this has become. I concur with the officer, Ms Geary, in that this hasn't been a place where employment has happened for some while, but that's not to say that with some forethought and discussion it could not be so again. But as I highlighted to you all in my email earlier this week, no one seems to think that sort of discussion is necessary. I hear cries of there's a housing crisis, and I would agree that we need to build the right homes in the right places. What we observe is that maybe there's a crisis of affordability, and we're not sure how 4 more 3-bedroom chalet bungalows will help deliver this, when the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan, which took us over 5 years to create, addresses the needs of the parish in the round, and in doing so creates more than 1,000 new dwellings up to 2031, including many which fall into the 3 and 4 bedroom attached and detached category. We worked hard to meet the criteria and ensure that the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan established a sustainable and realistic development footprint for the parish. This proposal, like the others before it, is not only outside of this agreed footprint, but adds nothing that is not already included and agreed. What we feel is needed on this site would be, and we'll be happy to discuss with anyone who approached us, is an opportunity to create something special that delivered local employment. That is not what you have in front of you this evening, and I recognise that. Our door's open, it always has been, but so far no one has sought to enter despite offers to have those conversations. It's an open invitation to do just that. So I would respectfully ask you to reconsider this application for what it is, in effect, more of the same, and send it back to the drawing board. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you, councillor. For the applicant, Joanna. So I would try pronouncing your surname, but I'm not going to butcher it. Sorry.
Joanna Dymowska. No problem. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, chair. Good evening, officers. You are tasked today to determine planning application for redevelopment of a site that former use is that of a nightclub. This site is a previously developed land. It's not a greenfield site, and the application is proposing delivery of 4 detached homes. The site is located sustainably with an availability of a frequent hourly bus service to the main settlements such as Harrietsham, Lenham, and also Maidstone Town Centre and Ashford. The proposed residential use would be in keeping with the existing structures and existing use along that stretch of a road. And in fact, it would be a use that is more neighbours friendly over the existing and lawful use of the site. The scheme comes to you after proactive discussions with planning officers. Despite the previous application that was determined by Maidstone Council being acceptable on all grounds other than Stodmarsh, the officers sought to engage with applicant to improve the design of the scheme even further, comments which were incorporated within the design of the scheme. And this really goes to show how proactive your planning officers are and how they try to deliver and encourage high quality schemes within your district. The proposed development has been designed to ensure no impact on trees, including tree preservation orders. Entire built form and footprint of the development is located outside of the root protection zone. In addition to that, we have kept the low density throughout the plot, making sure that it respects the rural context of the site. In addition, right now, what you're seeing from the street scene from A20 is the bare and intrusive hard standing at the front. The proposed development will deliver landscaped and open space at the front, softening the appearance of the existing application site, thus resulting in a visual impact as equally recognized by your planning officers in the delegated reports. Lastly, I wish to confirm with you that this application site is located outside of the Stodmarsh catchment area, and it is not proposed to connect to the main sewer. That is an existing arrangement within the site. The site benefits from Environment Agency permit for drainage, and the proposal is to deliver on-site treatment package to dispose of the foul water. So it has been demonstrated to officers that there is no impact on Stodmarsh. So for this reason, I ask you today to make the right decision and recommend this application for approval in line with your office's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Move to Councillor Cox first of all, is it your area? And Councillor Harwood and then Councillor Parfitt. Okay, thanks, Councillor Cox. I would just remind you, Councillor Levick, as much as I agree with Lennon Parish Council, it would be lovely to have this as a different use. We have to decide on the papers we've got in front of us. So, Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back into the mists of time, Victoria's was not always a good neighbour to the community living around it. And though I hear the point about continuing an employment use, you've got the big industrial complex at the Marley site not far away. You've got, I mean, I think there are better places, and I actually think that where officers and the applicant have got us now is about right in terms of density and in terms of form of development, and I think it actually complements that kind of cluster of ribbon development on the A20 Ashford Road. So I am happy to move that we grant permission as per the papers. The one question I did have though is historically we didn't have local plan backing for renewable energy, and essentially just through the fact that we were difficult, the local developers kind of agreed on kind of 10% as a figure to get them off our back, off their backs. We now do have a local plan that supports renewable energy. We have the NPPF has been strengthened in that respect, and yet we only have a minimum of 10% within our condition, and that usually means that's cheapest to bid the minimum amount. So I suggest that the 10% is unhelpful, and that other similar applications, in light of recent changes with the local plan review, we should remove that 10% reference. But I don't know if the officers have a view on that.
So first of all, about the trees at the front, I think Councillor Cox lots of protection put on those on the hedgerow to the front. And then secondly, the what Councillor Harwood has put. Marion, can you come back on those two items?
Yes, we could put a condition on that, keep the openness of the frontage and controls applications that need to come in. Obviously, permitted development rights are generally favoured towards the back of a property more than the front, but I certainly can ensure that's kept. When you say you want to remove the 10%, do you mean you want it to go up or just?
Yes, yeah, no, yes, significant. I mean, I'd like it to be 100% if possible, but I don't know why 10% is still around. It was, you know, that was the best we could get away with. Now we have a much stronger policy footing, and I think I mean, what I'm prepared to do perhaps is grant that we move permission, that we grant permission. However, perhaps give delegated powers to officers to look at the policy on renewables as to whether having any percentage is any longer required, but to actually inform it by the current policy landscape.
Yeah, I think I was going to suggest something similar along the lines of, obviously I can, if members are minded to approve, have a conversation with the agent, subject to a conversation with the agent as to what percentage can be achieved, and then to agree that with the chair and vice chair.
But I think there's a bigger issue for us as a planning authority as well around what do we use in our standard condition on renewable energy. But you know, this can be a test case perhaps. Thank you.
The new policy is 10% as well. The new policy is 10%.
The new policy, I don't think it places. That's why I was queasy about percentage. It just says that new schemes will use renewable energy. But
okay, Councillor, I would be just going to discuss that between themselves and come back to that one. I've got Councillor Parfitt next.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think I can see perhaps where this is headed before after I indicated. I think I have a certain sympathy with the chair of the parish council. My concern is the loss of potentially a commercial site within our borough, because we do know that we have a shortage of commercial sites. However, I can see that what is being proposed is better than what is there, and I do understand that we have to look at what is on the table, not what we might want. But I just do think we should be very cautious about putting housing in places where we could have commercial or industrial sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you. I concur about the loss of employment. I think it is a concern. However, my two key points. This is a 1.5 story building or buildings replacing a 1 story building, so there's an increase in height, which is clearly quite a change. I think the bit that slightly worries me is flicking through the policies. HOU 5 talks about the need to expected needs to hit a density of 30 dwellings per hectare in this kind of site, and yet we're seeing 13 dwellings per hectare proposed. So it's a third, well, just over a third of what should be there. So it doesn't fit with our new policies. That, not that it would necessarily look particularly good with a higher number of properties there, but that, you know, if we're just matching it to the policies, I think this does break it. And we have agreed a set of policies that I'm not overly comfortable with. Why are we not sticking to it and saying actually we need more homes there?
Thanks for that, Councillor Jeffreys. I will say I believe that's more like the say like with the speed limit. It's that's the highest we can go. Doesn't mean we have to put that amount on that site to go with it.
I'm sorry, it says new residential development will be expected to achieve a net density. So it's not a requirement, but it's not a higher limit. It's expected to achieve that. So it feels like to me that that's the lowest number it should achieve.
And we've also gone higher than that on some sites and lower on other sites. So again, it's not always completely descriptive of what it should be. Okay. I'll just bring the officers back, Councillor Thompson, before we go any further.
Yeah, unfortunately, because, clearly as a planner, I think it's great to have mixed developments. It's a shame to just see, dormitory settlements, but we don't have a policy protecting commercial. But coming back to the actual wording of the new policy, if I can put it that way, it's just for reference, it's policy QD1. And I'm quoting verbatim, because obviously we have to be consistent on every application. So criterion 6 states, all developments will be expected to incorporate 10% on-site renewable or low carbon energy production where appropriate. So arguably, you could say 10% is the maximum. This shall be measured as a percentage of overall consumption. So it is 10%. I agree sort of generally that that's pretty low, but I'm quoting from the policy. I do agree that it's a bit awkward. It does seem low, but I'm just very conscious that we have to be consistent with all applicants.
Okay, Councillor, I agree with you. That's low. Got Councillor Thompson.
A query as to, and I may be giving myself away here, but I'm happy to do that because it's in the general best interest of the conversation. Why is there not specific reference to the Lenham neighbourhood plan in this appraised application?
Yes, the key policies of the Lenham neighbourhood plan are discussed in the report. In particular, in terms of the brownfield policy, it does support small-scale residential redevelopment of previously developed land within the built-up area of Lenham. And as you know, in our local plan review, that is expanded into the brownfield land policy, and it's considered to meet all the criteria.
Okay, thanks for that, Marion. Okay. Anything else? Any councillors? Any more questions? Councillor, would you propose? If you proposed as per the papers, are you happy to accept the amendment with the condition for the protection for the front?
Yeah, do we want to strengthen that further, that the final landscaping condition comes back to the ward members to ensure that they're content?
Yep, I'm happy to put that. So the ward members, myself and the vice chair.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'm happy to second that with that amendment. Okay, all those in favour? Those against? Okay, that is approved. Okay, moving on. We move on to Moat Lodge School Lane. Moat Lodge School Lane, Maidstone. Okay, this is a listed building consent. I'll move to the officer to introduce.
Yes, this application is in front of members because the building belongs to Maidstone Borough Council. So in accordance with our constitution, it's coming in front of the committee for formal determination. It's considered to be a Curtilage listed building because of its relationship, historical connection with the listed properties at Moat Park. There are currently some UPVC windows to the property which are considered to be out of keeping, including the door and the bay window features. The existing photographs, and that's the door. That's the relationship of the property to Moat Park itself. That's the setting of the building is relevant to those issues you need to address. Effectively, it's to replace the UPVC windows with more sympathetic timber windows of a cottage style. These are generally the illustrations to the front elevation. So windows will also be added to the side rear elevation as on this drawing. And to the door will become more of a sort of timber cottage planked style rather than the modern door currently in situ. Just to raise a few points in the committee report itself. In the recommendation, it says grant planning permission, but obviously it's that grant listed building consent, and any conditions would be listed building conditions, not planning conditions. And just technically, we need to add a reason for condition 3, and obviously it'd be similar to condition 2, which is to preserve the character, appearance, and special interest of the Curtilage listed building. The condition has been imposed to get the detail of the new windows in terms of their sections and the glazing bars, and more specifics on the type of timber, just to make sure that they are as sympathetic to the building as possible. But that's been deferred to a planning condition as detailed in the papers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Councillor Cleater.
Yeah, as ward member, we were consulted before this came to plan and made aware, and we've had 0 objections from local residents. So on that basis, I propose we go to the vote.
So, I like it. Okay, I'm going to go on Councillor Jeffries.
Sorry, there is just one question, and I wonder if it could be picked up as a condition, because I can't see anything here about the type of glazing that goes in. I'm very much in favour of replacing it with wood, absolutely. But should it not be specified that it should be a double glazed unit in that glass? I couldn't see that in there. Clearly, we want to make sure buildings are well insulated.
I think they are double glazed units from what I read on the description. Unfortunately, as you can see, the details on the drawings haven't translated very well to a slideshow, but it says timber casement windows incorporating slim light thin double glazing with a central timber grille. So they are as thin as possible, but double glazed, yes.
Okay, on that then, we shall move to the vote. All in favour? That is unanimous and approved. Okay, moving on. Item 13, Hawthorne Place. Who's the officer to introduce?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry for the delay there. Before I introduce the application, I just want to verbally correct the wording of recommended condition 10. The words "and except for what is approved in condition 9 of this permission" should be deleted. So moving on, Hawthorne Place currently benefits from permanent unrestricted permission for one static caravan, and this retrospective application is for the stationing of one additional caravan on the site. The development does not increase the land area of Hawthorne Place. The site is within designated countryside. It's not within flood zones 2 or 3, and the existing site and neighbouring sites have all previously been found to be sustainable in terms of their location. The application has been reported to committee at the request of Harwich Parish Council. So this is just an area of the site. As you can see, it is enclosed by existing sites, and the aerial's not updated, but this land here is also now given over to a gypsy site. This is the access with the site on the right. This is looking back towards the site, which is in here from Greenway Lane. And again, just a wider context, showing the lane. And then looking back down that lane, you can see it's well screened with the access just visible there. This is the site location plan. And this is the layout with the 2 mobiles there. Local Plan Review Policy HOU8 allows for windfall. Oh, sorry. The submission is necessary to maintain a close-knit family that have lived on the site for several years. And as the report sets out, the scheme is read in the context of surrounding development and does not result in more built form encroaching into undeveloped countryside. Furthermore, the site is largely screened by existing development and landscaping and does not appear visually dominant or incongruous from within the landscape. It also does not cause any further unacceptable harm to the setting of the Kent Downs National Landscape when considering the site's planning history and context. The Local Plan Review Policy HO8 allows for windfall gypsy accommodation in the countryside, provided certain criteria are met. And at this time, the council is unable to demonstrate an up-to-date 5-year supply of deliverable sites. Relevant to this application, there is no objection in terms of gypsy status. Hawthorne Place is an existing lawful site, and so the principle for such a development has already been accepted. And in accordance with Policy HOU8, the harm caused to the landscape and rural character of the area is not considered to be significant. Further to this, the application is considered to be acceptable in all other planning respects, and the development, when considered on its own merits and cumulatively with other lawful sites in the vicinity, is not unacceptable. On this basis, a recommendation of approval is made subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. The representative for Harwich Parish Council can't be here tonight, so Jordan is going to read out a letter that they've sent in.
Thank you, Chair. Oakland Place was originally a large rectangular piece of agricultural land, which has now been divided into 4, namely Austin's Place, Hawthorne Place, Oakland Place, and 2 Oaklands. In addition, at the Planning Committee meeting in June this year, the land west of site, as defined in the officer's report, but now known as Silver Birch, was approved for 2 static and 2 touring caravans for gypsy and traveller use. However, none of these properties are listed as authorised gypsy and traveller sites by MBC. The development is on what was originally a green agricultural field within the setting of the Kent Downs National Landscape, although just outside the boundary. The proposed development has affected the existing views from the Downs, just as the neighbouring properties have done, and the site is visible over the Harwich to Hollingbourne Railway embankment. The aerial view of the site in section 2 of the officer's report clearly shows 4 vehicles. So well. 2 of these are commercial vehicles, but there is no transport or highway details provided in the application. The application site is on the narrow country lane with passing places. Without information about the commercial use of the land, it is impossible to know the effect of this activity on the site, its effect on the adjacent residential sites, and on the road. Harwich and Parish Council reiterates that it is opposed to this application as approval would not be enhancing and protecting Maystones and Harwichham's valued landscapes.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Okay. Moving on then, Councillor Cox, the ward member. Okay, thanks for Cox. Kate, come back on that.
Yes, with regards to condition 7, that probably is a mistake and should be, say, 10 years, because we asked for a 10-year management plan. So I think, yeah, that will be changed. Condition 3, it does read that each pitch shall only have one static. So I think that does read okay. So there should be no more than 2 pitches on the site, and on each of the pitch approved, there shall be no more than 1 static caravan and 1 tourer stationed at one time. So the site has permission for 1 static, and this is just to add another. So it's making sure the whole site is controlled with just 2 mobiles on the site. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Cleaver.
Yeah, thank you. Just cleared up one point, but I wanted to just concur with Councillor Cox. I haven't been on the planning committee very long. However, this is about the 3rd application where it's retrospective. And I would expect people to know who's going to, I've got nothing against the application, I have to say that, but actually we are getting a lot of retrospective applications when actually people should be supported to do the right thing at the right time. So I just want that noting, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Though people are allowed to make retrospective applications, there's nothing in the rules that say you can't take that approach. And I think actually the family circumstances have led to the issue on this site. But very quickly, could officers put up the picture of the lane going towards Greenway Forestall? Because I think that's a really useful picture. The one with the hedge showing the edge of the site. Yeah. I think that shows the difference in the landscape, that you've got the gypsy site is behind the big hedge, and then you've got this just agricultural wasteland for as far as the eye can see. So I think in terms of landscape interest and biodiversity, I struggle with finding any harm from putting an additional mobile home behind that hedge. So I think there is no harm to the landscape that we can evidence, or wider harm coming from this. So therefore, with the small change on regulating the 10-year replacement condition on landscaping, I'm happy to move that we grant permission as per the papers. Thank you.
Okay, do you have a seconder? Councillor Spooner. Okay. We'll take Councillor Thompson and Jeffrey. Councillor Spooner, do you wish to reserve your right, or do you want to talk now?
Reserve my right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am minded to refer to recommendation 12 on page 44, which I'm suggesting is a similar application. There is detailing there about the septic discharge concerns. So reading what seems to me the greater level of detail in that application and the recommendations that were advanced for it, therefore referring back in this case, I'm on page 17 at 6.24. It simply notes that there is existing use of a soakaway and septic tank, and then it says no further details are required. I wonder whether we should be, notwithstanding the other issues, beefing that up in some way. I'm grateful for the description of the history that tells us how this original plot was split into pieces. With regard to the soakaway and septic treatment, how much is that division that we're seeing in this case with this red box a realistic assessment of the potential impacts of foul water treatment, and how much is it an artificial division of the site into pieces, whereas it seems to me the possibility that several caravans are disposing of their waste into, say, a septic tank, and we should be asking questions about the intensity of that use and therefore the risk of contamination. Speculative questions, I know, but these are the questions that I have.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Jeffries, and I'll come back to officers.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to support the motion to approve this. Just a question, really. We had a discussion a minute ago about the paltry 10% of renewables that's in. Does it apply to static caravans, or should it apply and should it be a condition?
Okay, come back on those two questions.
With regards to the septic tank, we know that the site uses a septic tank and that's taken in isolation for Hawthorne Place, so it's not deemed necessary to require further details of that. However, the other sites deal with that issue. It's not for consideration, and septic tanks tend to be dealt with by the EA anyway in terms of licensing and checking. And for me, the renewable energies sort of don't apply to GIPSY applications.
We do usually apply it to day rooms or to kind of built units, but not to caravans. I think that has been what we've done historically.
Okay, Councillor Springett.
I've just come back from an narrowboat holiday, and as you chug along the canals, there's an awful lot of people that live on narrowboats, which are floated caravans. They all have solar panels. So I'm just wondering why. It's something perhaps we haven't actually thought about before, and perhaps we should think about when we review our local plan. But I don't see why the static caravans should not be encouraged to put solar panels on their roof, because if you can do it on a boat, I'm sure you can do it on a static caravan. So Councillor Jeffrey sort of stole my thunder on that one, but that was exactly the point I was making. Thank you.
Good to see that we're agreeing. Councillor Harwood.
Yeah, the Gypsy and Traveller DPD is in preparation, and there was going to be a member early consultation event, and it's one of the issues that could be swept up within that document is getting to the bottom of the technical issues.
Councillor Jeffreys.
Sorry, can I just suggest maybe that we ask officers, give delegated powers to officers to just dive back into the policy suite to see if it should be applied or can be applied, and if so, added as a condition outside of the committee.
Thanks for that, and we will do that. Just to point out that the reason why we haven't asked for the 20% BNG, which does apply, is because it's a retrospective application, and there's a quirk of the legislation that BNG does not apply to retrospective. I'm getting further legal advice on that.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Okay. So Councillor Cleater.
Sorry, just to come back on what the officers said. So basically, yeah, break the rules, and well, no, not break the rules, because you can have retrospective. I don't see why you can't put that condition on a retrospective application, because the people have come and said, right, this is what we would like to do. And for us, I think we should say, yeah, that's fine, but actually to meet these requirements, rules, this is what you need to do. So I can't see personally why we can't have those conditions.
Yes, I was just bringing it to your attention, given your comments about retrospective applications, but the way the BNG biodiversity net gain legislation is written is that it's all future tense. So obviously with a retrospective application, it's happened. It's just a legal fact.
Okay, Councillor Clear.
Right, so can we not put something out there that says that we expect any application, whether retrospective or, if you like, upfront, to meet this? And then we put it out there.
No, we can't, simply because policy doesn't override legislation. We could have, as Councillor Harwood said, in the new G&T DPD, we could tackle that issue head on to overcome that tension between the two. But at the moment, law overrides policy. I am seeking further legal views to see if there's any way around it, but the most obvious way would be via the.
Okay, Councillor Harwood, and then we'll move.
Just really very quickly to come back on Councillor Cleater's point, we have got condition 7. So even though we can't link into biodiversity net gain, we can get some biodiversity enhancements. And I've been to a number of sites recently where they have got back tubes and so on that have been built in and they're working okay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Can I just confirm who seconded Councillor Harwood? Okay, in that case, I'll second Councillor Harwood. Okay. Okay, all those in favour? So sorry.
I think I seconded, but I reserve my right, and there's nothing more I want to say. Thank you.
Sorry, I can't remember. Thank you. Okay, all those in favour? Unanimous. Okay, that is approved. Okay, moving on then. So this is a starred item. Does anyone wish to talk on this and see it introduced? No? Go with him.
Yeah, just some members are aware. I would like to request delegated authority to amend some of the conditions which refer to the site development plan. The conditions referred to as some of the conditions referred to as being condition 7. It's condition 8. So I just need to go through the conditions and just make sure that's all correct. And also, I've been in some discussions with the applicant. The application isn't retrospective. They've requested a bit more time to carry out some of the lighting details requested by conditions 13, 14, as well as condition 8. So I'd like to request that the time limit portion of condition 8 be extended from 6 weeks to 12 weeks. So that'll be 3 months for them to comply, so they can properly comply with the condition.
Okay.
Move as per the papers, but with the changes outlined by the case officer.
So I think Councillor Jeffries, if you want to talk on the item, we need to have it introduced.
I was going to second it, but I only wondered if that condition that we had on the last one could same thing in terms of the delegated thing on renewables. That was what I was going to mention.
We've got a proposer and a seconder with the amendment for the conditions. Rob, are you able to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all in favour? Okay. Okay, those against? Abstaining? Oh, okay. Sorry, Councillor Cox, do you have to do quick if you actually want to say you want to introduce, you do have to say, I want this introduced. Okay, so you did, you have to say. Okay, that is approved. Okay, item 16. Called upon Sam to introduce the report. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application concerns 27 Charles Street, a terrace dwelling house located in Fant within Maystone's urban boundary. The application is for the change of use of the dwelling to an 8-bedroom HMO. The application includes small alterations to the external appearance, incorporating additional glazing at basement level. 27 Charles Street is considered to be a sustainable location to facilitate this change of use, located at a short distance from the town centre. The site benefits from satisfactory public services and transport links. The proposal includes no changes in scale, and so there'd be no changes to neighbouring outlook or sunlight daylight. There is deemed to be limited added disturbance or nuisance in comparison to the previous use of the dwelling of up to 8 people, It is noted also that the building could be used as a HMO for up to 6 people without planning permission. The individual rooms are considered to have appropriate levels of amenity with no objections raised from the housing standards team. The insertion of additional glazing at basement level was to ensure that the standard of accommodation here was acceptable in terms of light received. The added windows will not cause harm to visual amenity or street scene. In assessing visual amenity, I considered both cycle and bin storage. The cycle store has been proposed to the rear, accessible by the rear access, and details have been provided by the applicant of the type of storage used, which would include 4 racks. Refuse will be stored to the front of the building with a condition attached to ensure that it is screened adequately in order to protect the street scene. The last point relates to parking. Given the location, there would be limited reliance on private vehicles. The principle of development is established by previous approval at appeal at 14 Charles Street for 8 separate units, for which reason I'm recommending approval.
Okay. Thanks for that. Councillor Keeley.
Thank you. I'm here today to speak on behalf of Councillor Kimmy Millam as she is away on holiday. Her views are based on facts and the concerns of the residents in her ward. Reading through the papers submitted by the applicant, they appear to be utterly dismissive of the council and are of the opinion that they can do what they want. With regards to proposal 2.2.01, the application is for the change of use of an 8-bedroom single-family dwelling to an 8-bedroom house in multiple occupation. There is no proposed change to the internal building layout, with all the bedrooms provided with an ensuite and either a shower or a bath. The accommodations are provided with kitchen dining area at ground floor. I am incredulous that the officers seem to accept the applicant's claim that this is an 8-bedroomed house. There seems little doubt that it was not an 8-bedroomed house. There are no reception rooms, so where exactly would the family have been, confined to their predominantly 9-metre square bedrooms? This property was originally a 3-bedroom property. Claims that the 4 proposed bins will be stored at the back of the property is ridiculous. There is no direct access from the back garden to the front of the house. The alleyway goes on to Douglas Road. Instead, the bins will be wheeled through the house and kitchen each week, or more likely they will be left out at the front of the house on the road, as there is not enough space in the front garden. While the planning inspector clearly had no concern for local residents in 2022, in the recent appeal, and obviously has no idea of the scale of the parking problems around this area of Fant, it is clear to me that there will be an additional 8 vehicles resulting from this HMO, and there is currently no parking available. There are space for 6 bikes, no cars. This will add up to significant problems that this area faces and adds cumulatively to significantly harm the character of the area. Policy LPRH-OU2 states that redevelopment of a residential property which meet the following criteria will be permitted if sufficient parking would be provided within the curtilage of the dwelling without diminishing the character of the street scene. Yet no parking is proposed. There is also simply not enough capacity in the sewage system. The pipes are breaking and causing sinkholes in the local area. Water companies are pumping sewage into the river. An additional 8 dwellings may not seem much in isolation, but the cumulative effect with the other developments locally needs to be addressed. In addition, there is no consideration about how these new 8 dwellings will use less than 110 litres per person per day. There are no on-site renewables included in this conversion. There should be 10%. In essence, policy LPRH-OU2 stated that for a HMO to be allowed, the intensified use of the building and its curtilage will not significantly harm the appearance of the building or the character or the amenity of the surrounding area. It is quite clear that moving from what was originally a 3-bedroom house to an 8-bedroom HMO, plus the cumulative effect of other HMOs in the area, means that there will be significant harm to the character of the surrounding area. We urge you to reject this application and the precedent it sets for for future planning application and attempts to hoodwink the planning officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Keeley. So, Councillor Coates.
Good evening, everybody. I'm reading this statement on behalf of Councillor Paul Harper, who is in Northern Ireland. I start by correcting an error, paragraph 606. It states that only 10% of the properties in Charles Street are HMOs. In a report in April 2022, stated that 15.4% of the properties in Charles Street were HMOs, with 4 licensed HMOs and a further 2 shared test HMOs. Since then, more HMOs have arisen, including a number of properties converted to children's homes. The street is losing the character of a residential neighbourhood. Charles Street is a route into and out of Fant, partially one-way accessing 2 schools, infants and junior schools. The northern part is also a bus route and classic rat run. As the residents will tell you, this proposal is an environmental, unsustainable and overdevelopment of the site. Charles Street is in a residential parking zone. Speak to residents, they will tell you the daily nightmare of parking. The application has caused us a considerable level of local concern. This is not reflected in the objections you have received, as the residents are sick of objecting to proposals which wreck their environment, and whatever they say, they are almost invariably passed. There's a massive level of scepticism in the community. It's time this council takes action to address this issue. Over a year ago, you pledged to review parking standards and nothing happened. 2 years ago, we requested an Article 4 direction to take forward the design and sustainability DPD to include a review of DM23, and once adopted, seeks to bring in A4DS in Fant on a street-by-street basis once HMO prevalence reaches the evidence threshold. Nothing has happened. We now have a Green Independent alliance with Lib Dems, when in opposition said something had to be done. Tonight is the time to start that and show that we have some compassion for the residents of Fant and act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coates. Okay, we don't actually have a ward councillor, but I think Councillor Jeffries, you're probably the closest to it.
Yeah, I can do. Thank you. Where do I start? I think just in terms of 6.02 in the papers, and I think I heard Councillor Keeley read out part of this, that there's a word here that seems to have changed from would to should. In fact, there's 2 words that have changed from would to should, and they have quite different meanings. Would means it must happen, and should means it should happen. So I'm concerned that I'm sure that's a mistake, but it kind of leads us to letting it go through. Whereas I think, we have to be absolutely clear that then if there is significant harm then to the amenity of the surrounding area, then we should say no. We should say no. We must say no. Sorry, getting me woulds and shoulds muddled up. It's easily done. I think I am really quite concerned that this is being accepted as a 8-bedroom family dwelling. I looked at the plans online and thought, how on earth does a family live there in a 2-bed, 2.5-bed house and claim to be an 8-bed dwelling? I don't necessarily think that's material to the planning application, but it is a bit frustrating. I think the point that was made around the bins is very well made. Having an HMO of that size with that tiny little courtyard at the front to put some bins in, they are going to be all over the road. I cannot see any way that that would be avoided, and that would significantly affect the amenity of the area. So I do think there are some significant concerns here, and of course haven't even got the 10% renewables in the conditions. So I'm concerned about some of those aspects.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Councillor Cleater. Councillor Parfitt.
Oh, I don't mind. Call me what you like.
No, don't even want me to do that.
Just a couple of points, really. One is actually about procedure, but I do think it's important. Call in from Councillor Millam, no reasons given. Now, having called in applications a number of times myself, I've actually had to give proper planning reasons for calling in applications, and I've had to work quite hard to do that. So I just wondering, because the public can see these papers, we need to be consistent. Obviously, we've heard from Councillor Keeley, Councillor Millam's reasons, so it now all makes sense, but I just wanted to make that point. Secondly, Councillor Jeffrey, and I think others are going to say, there is absolutely no way on earth that is an 8-bedroomed house. I've worked in property for many years, and that is not an 8-bedroomed house, and I just wonder why we are just taking it at face value and not challenging that, because I just think the quality of life that anybody living in that house is just, to me, unacceptable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parfitt. Councillor Cleater.
I speak as someone who used to work in a house of multiple occupancy in Fant in Bower Place, which was a registered place for people with mental health issues. It was a huge Georgian house, and we could only get 6 rooms there. How that is classed as an 8-bedroom house, then please give me the magic wand that they obviously use to do that. And I think, to me, this is about, we have a responsibility, obviously, as an authority, as a planning authority. We also have a responsibility as authority for people's health and well-being. And this is the human equivalent of battery hens, to be quite honest, putting as many people in. I don't care what the law says about how many square metres, the effect on people who have to live in these properties. My other concern is around safety in the case of fire in a building of multiple occupancy. Escape from a rear bedroom window off the kitchen dining area and means of escape to the rear. This is basically admitting that that's not an 8-bedroom house with appropriate ways to get in and out. And we've just seen recently the issue of a family who died up in Bradford with no means of escape. So on this alone, I mean, if anyone, I wouldn't want to live in a 9 metre square. We have a housing issue, of course we do, but we don't do it by allowing Rackmans, to be quite honest. And to me, if you're going to dig out a light well to provide more natural light as well, how many bins are going to be needed? Is everyone going to get a bin each? Because then that'll be 16. 8 black bins, 8 recycling bins, and 8 food bins. Well, please tell me on that cartilage where they're going to go. Now, this may go to appeal. I don't know. We may vote for it, we may not. But actually, I didn't come in to being a councillor to be basically voting for slum housing.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. I was just going to ask Will, I'll come to Mark in a minute. Sam, sorry. Sam, could you get the the actual plans for the actual layout while Councillor Nagy speaks. Yeah, the floor layout, because to tell you the truth, I used to live in a house of this size and I'm a bit baffled about how you fit 8. Okay, so Councillor Nagy.
Yes, no, so just very briefly, just in regards to the statements that have been made by Councillor Cleater and Parfy, I totally agree on the health and safety side of things. I mean, we're already looking at what was originally a 3-bedroom property being pushed up to a 6, now going up to an 8, and where it may already work as a 6, trying to push that extra limit onto the site with the parking, the space, and inside the building itself. I mean, we're already looking at very minimalistic metre squareage inside of the site as well. And I totally agree that that can have a detrimental effect, not only with personal space, but mental health as well. And again, the argument with the bins is spot on, because that is already a very narrow site outside, let alone having to deal with all the extra space. But yes, I totally agree with both of the councillor statements there that we shouldn't be trying to push more people into an already struggling area of site. But yeah, other than that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nagy. Councillor Springett.
Thank you. We've been battling with these for ages. You know, I remember Councillor Harper, gosh, 2 years ago, asking for an Article 4. We're just battling and losing. Now, we've already seen this. In one place, we've got 10% of that street, and now we've got someone saying there's 15% of that street. Is it worth, can I propose that the Chairman of Planning write to the Cabinet Member for Planning and Strategic Development and asks that in the upcoming review of the local plan, a proper policy is developed regarding houses of multiple occupancy to respect the health and well-being of the occupants, the street scene, over dominance within the street scene, etc. I really think we've been kicking around the edges for so long on this, and we need a proper policy. And I don't know how we do it apart from through the local plan, but we need to get it somewhere in an agenda to get this properly looked at. And the only way I can think to do is that the chair writes to the Cabinet Member to say, when you review the local plan, please look at introducing a policy on HMOs. That's just my proposal if anybody wants to take it up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Springett. I'll bring Tony in, but me and Councillor Harwood and Councillor Summersgill actually had a meeting just recently about HMOs, and we are bringing a policy through on this. However, I'll let Councillor Harwood, as the Cabinet Member, actually give you more detail.
Yeah, I mean, within 2 days of taking on the portfolio, I had a meeting that Mr. Jarman was at and various others. And the vehicle we're using is the design and sustainability DPD, because that's the quickest way of doing it, not from scratch, a document that's already in place. And the approach we're taking is genuinely around the quality of life and the room sizes and it's the only way we can do it. Because just as a little bit of background, the 2012 National Planning Policy Framework, it had something called paragraph 50, and that talks about mixed and balanced communities, and that was what local authorities based their HMO policies on. In 2021, the NPPF was republished with paragraph 50 missing to remove that ability for councils to challenge. So it's quite tricky to do it, but we're doing it through the DPD because it's the quickest route. But I would also add that a key plank of this is parking standards as well, which is slightly separate, but is another route that is being used. But currently we're in basically a very difficult policy position, hence the appeal losses that we've suffered of late.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Rob.
Yeah, just to echo what Councillor Harwood said, and as Sam points out in his report very clearly, in paragraph 6.19 on page 52, as has been said, there are no current internal planning policy standards for HMOs, and my firm understanding is that will be crucial, or the main plank to the new policy. And whether we like it or not, there are two controls. There's one through planning, and there's one through the HMO license as well, the licensing regime. And as Sam has pointed out, that every single room does comply with the standards required by the HMO license.
Councillor Jeffries, Councillor Cox.
Two things. Just to come back on Councillor Parfitt's comment about call-ins, the current constitution doesn't require a reason to be given. It was changed 2.5 years ago. There is no reason to give. There's no need to give a reason anymore. I'm going to propose that we reject this application on the basis that this will significantly harm the character and amenity of the surrounding areas. It is a cramped development that will spill out onto the road, both in terms of bins and cars and people, given that they have no place to sit. There is no communal areas, for example. So I think the new local plan does give us those words that allows us to do that, and I think that will be significant harm, both in its own and probably as a cumulative effect.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the report refers to, and Councillor Coates touched on it, the report refers to Charles Street having 10% HMOs. And I can see where the figure for 15.4% comes from. So that's from a briefing note that I found earlier to do with the Article 4 direction that was sort of attempted a few years ago. So I'm just wondering where that discrepancy comes from. Has there been sort of a more recent gathering of baseline position of quantum of HMOs in FAN?
Sam, can you answer that question?
No, I'm unsure. Sorry.
Is that possibly because the children's homes are classified as differently to HMOs, which obviously may be included in this figure?
Possibly, and obviously time's moved on since I think it was the PAC committee decided on not going with an Article 4 direction. Obviously, even if they decided to go for an Article 4, there's absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that the Secretary of State would agree to one. But on the Councillor Jeffrey is spot on. There is a policy protecting character and appearance, and obviously this will, to a degree, change the character and appearance of the area in that there'll be at least one more HMO, arguably a very intensive HMO. But I'm sorry to keep coming back with but. If it went to appeal, we've got absolutely no thresholds at all. An inspector could say, why are you just picking on Charles Street? You know, just because it's a street. In my experience, inspectors will look at a much wider area. And even if we went down the percentage route, I would have thought if you look at Fant as a whole, or the eastern half of Fant, you know, there's just nothing in the policy about, you know, we'd have to argue a sort of domination argument that the sort of essential character of Charles Street is still family housing, and that has been lost because of this one. But I think we'd be struggling for the reasons I said. I do agree. I've been to the Fant area a number of times. There are problems, as it's been identified with like the number of bins, the fact that all the front gardens are gone. There's issues with parking. I could go on, but Yeah, it's a bit bleak in terms of the policy landscape.
Okay, Councillor Cox and Councillor Cleaver. And Councillor, I'll bring the officers back. Councillor Cleaver.
Councillor Cox has raised the point. One of the questions I was going to ask is, has Ken Fire and Rescue been round and assessed that building? Because I'm sorry, if we approve something that then could possibly lead to fatalities, because to be quite honest, we're scared of the planning inspector, then I think that's wrong of us. As I say, I have no problem in the right place for the right sort of setting with HMOs. This one, though, is just packing people in. And I wouldn't want to live in a house where I would have restricted means of escape. I've lived in a block of flats that went on fire. It's not nice. It's not good. It's terrifying. And I think that for me, I know we get visits round estates and that with the planning officers. I think we should start visiting some of these proposed HMOs and actually get a view of what they're proposing and who's going to be housed in there. Because for me, it's the health and safety and risk to the people who will be in those houses, I think, is something that we really need to take seriously if we are going to start approving or saying we can't do nothing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cleaver. Just to address the fire issue, that would be covered under HMO licensing rules and building regs. So it's not a planning issue as such. And Councillor Harper used to bring that up quite a lot as well, to his truth. So I do know that he had issues with that. Councillor Spooner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I fully understand members' concerns about this application. But for the life of me, I cannot, well, there's absolutely no policy basis upon which to refuse it. At the end of the day, as I said earlier in the meeting, this committee is charged with making technically justified, legally sound planning decisions. And that is what we should focus ourselves on. There are lots of issues raised by other councillors this evening which relate to the licensing regime and to building regulations. But looking at the individual application, it's an 8-bedroomed house being converted into an 8-bedroom HMO. Numbers of occupants will probably stay the same. We've recently had an appeal just up the road, which was an increase from 6 to 8, which we refused. That was allowed on appeal. And the inspector said, no impact upon parking, no impact upon traffic, no impact upon the local environment. We could refuse this application, which perhaps some members want to do, and I can understand their strong feelings about this. But at the end of the day, we just cannot make that stick on appeal. We just won't be able to convince an inspector that that decision is correct. And I think by refusing this one, we're just giving false hope to local residents, false hope to people in Fant that this is going to be stopped, but it won't be, because at the end of the day, I'm convinced we would lose the appeal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, are you moving what's on the papers then, Councillor Spooner?
Sorry?
Are you moving what's on the papers then, Councillor Spooner?
I thought they'd already been moved to approve. Was there not?
No, there's one movement against, which no one seconded. So if you're moving...
I would move that we approve as per the order papers, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, as well, I agree with Councillor Spooner on this. It's a legislative issue. The army house you in better conditions than actually what are listed here, to your truth, and prisoners probably get a better room. Unfortunately, we are governed by policy, And on that, we have to follow that. That is what this committee is here for. However, obviously with the new DPD, hopefully we can actually resolve some of these issues. Unfortunately, just on this case, this won't be one of them. So with a proposal and a second, I am going to move to the vote. Okay, so all those in favour? Okay, against? Okay, abstain. Okay, that fails. So I now look to the other members to give us some reasons for refusal.
I think I set out my reasons for refusal when I proposed it, that this will cause significant harm to the character and amenity of the surrounding areas through all the things we've discussed.
Do you have a seconder on that? Thank you, Councillor Cleaver. Okay, so move to the vote. Okay, those in favour of refusal? Okay, those abstaining? You abstaining, Mark? Yeah, okay, abstaining. Okay, and those against? Okay, that is refused. Okay, thank you, councillors. We now move on to appeals. I'll move to Mr. Jarman to introduce the appeals.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, pretty good on Hoole. 8 out of 12 won. You've probably read at least one article on Kent Online about the proposed Aldi store, which we did lose at appeal, and in some respects is quite an interesting decision. I think a number of councillors attended the public inquiry, but essentially, going back to first principles, what the inspector concluded was that there was clear flexibility in the wording of the policy to allow for additional retailing. Whereas our argument as officers was that there was a clear distinction between the Newnham Court part of the site, as shown on the boundary, on the, sorry, the proposals map, and the Kent Medical Campus. But the inspector said that the policy wording, yeah, allowed for retail and allowed the appeal. We are getting some additional legal advice on that rationale, but I suspect what we'll get is that policies always have to be explicit in their wording as opposed to implicit.
Okay, any questions on that? Councillor Harwood.
Yeah, I genuinely think it's a nail in the coffin of the medical campus, because though there's no precedent in planning, there's an inspector's determination that basically you can get planning permission for an out-of-town supermarket on that site. And we know, frankly, that the landowner all along has wanted that sort of mixed development. And, you know, the future, well, it does look bright because we'll have kind of 24-hour lit up on a plateau, you know, in front of the Kent Downs. It's a really, yeah, we're told we're in a plan-led system. But it seems that, yeah, not to the planning inspectorate. And I think I do have another concern, just from my reading of the report, in that the inspector's narrative seems to be going in one direction, but then basically the paragraph that says that the economic development benefit outweighs all of the other policy issues could be bolted onto any report. And I do worry that this is an instruction to the planning inspectorate to let through, you know, anything which has an economic development impact.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mark Nagy.
Yeah, and just on this same point, obviously being the ward councillor, we had a meeting with the officers in regards to this site. And the officers' arguments against putting the approval of the site was very sound. From the sound of things, they'd looked at everything, came back with solid arguments against it, and now it looks like it's gone through based on the review of the one gentleman that's looked at it and come back. And it's very concerning that we can go from a point where it looked like we had all the arguments in place against the site, everything was sound based on the officers' arguments, to then come back from the planning inspector's review of it, and all of a sudden that's gone. So yeah, I'd just like to voice my concerns on that we had a process, we went with the officers, everything was sound, and it's just been overruled based on, like Councillor Harwood said, that one argument. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to voice my opinion on that for Councillor Harwood's statement.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mark Nagy. Councillor Spooner, then Cleater, then Parfitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was bitterly disappointed with this decision. In all my years of being a planner, this is perhaps the worst planning inspector decision I've ever come across. It was really heartbreaking. And I think we have now lost all opportunity of having any high value, high salaried medical, social, community facilities on that site at all. It's referred to as Kent Medical Campus, but I think that is now going to be a complete and utter nonsense. That site in a few years' time will be an American-style out-of-town retail park. It's inevitable that other out-of-town retailers will follow Aldi, because Aldi's a big pull. They will drag in lots and lots of people. They're, oh, right, okay, we're going to build our store next door to theirs. And the same will happen at Kent Medical Campus, as is now happening on Eclipse Park. And we will be powerless to stop it. I'm afraid the people of Maidstone have lost the opportunity of having some really good employment, good social, good medical facilities there. Instead, they just have more cheap and nasty retail sheds, which will provide only low level of income, low level jobs. And even the retailers are doing away with their manned checkouts now. They're becoming more and more automated. So the jobs promise, I think, is completely fallacious. But we are stuck with it now, and we've got to live with it. So there we are. I've had my rant. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spooner. Councillor Cleater.
Well, here's my rant on behalf of the Labour Party then. I actually substituted for Councillor Wilkinson at that particular meeting, and I was very, very clear that my objection, and I have nothing against Aldi, I shop there every week, but that campus is a medical campus. And as I pointed out in the debate then, with all due respect to those who work in Aldi, they are the best payers at retail, but that is not the sort of high quality jobs we were looking to bring to Maidstone. We have a responsibility as well, which we took into account for the economic development of this area. And I was absolutely appalled when I read that in the Kent Messenger. We declined the application on very specific planning grounds. Rob will look and think that'll be a first for you, Maureen, but there you go. But it was very specific. That area was part of that medical campus. And, you know, who's getting accused of taking brown envelopes over that one? Because it's all of us sat round here and we had nothing to do with it. The planning inspector, I don't know what they were thinking, but clearly, that is going to totally lead to that area just being full of retail. It's clogged up beyond recognition now if you try and drive there. And as a local resident, I live in Penedon Heath, it's just going to get worse, and it's absolutely awful. And the only other thing I'd say is that if this means, from what I've read in the paper, that it's a way to get the roundabout done, then I think it's a pretty poor way of doing it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cleaver. Councillor Parfitt.
You'll be relieved I'm not going to rant. I just want to ask a question, and I'm sorry if this is a pedestrian question, but my understanding of the reason that this was now being approved by the planning inspector was because that this area where the supermarket is, he decided was not in the medical campus curtilage. Is that, do I have incorrected? Because what I don't really understand is how we cannot know where the line of the medical campus is. I mean, so I just want that answering, please. Thank you.
I don't want to defend the planning inspectorate on any appeal, quite frankly, but it was obviously Aldi's King's Council who picked a hole in the policy wording, and the inspector agreed with Aldi's King's Council. And as I said earlier, the inspector, well, you know, on the back of King's Council, just states that the policy itself, as in the policy wording, allows for additional wording, additional retailing, hence allowing the appeal. Well, that's when you get into arguments about implicit and explicit. We, as officers, and we used consultants, were saying something like, well, you have to look at the proposals map. But an obvious argument to argue against myself is cross-referencing to the proposals map within the policy wording.
Okay, so because this is a policy issue, what I'm going to propose within the new local plan towards the cabinet member that we actually strengthen this policy and this wording that can be got around so that it is solely for medical campus. So within the new, it is a bit late now, but as we've just talked about potential more ones coming forward, we do need to strengthen that policy within the new local plan. Let's be honest, they're not going to probably build out that quickly, hopefully. But if we can get something within the new local plan, hopefully we can actually stop this issue happening again, like we did with the school and we lost the nature reserve and so on. So there's lots of bits around the medical campus which we've probably had a few own goals, shall we say, and we need to strengthen our policies on that matter. I'd Councillor Jeffries, then I'll go to Springett, and then Spooner will be the last. Yeah.
Yeah, my turn for a rant. I mean, this is a slap in the face for us, isn't it? I absolutely agree with what's been said. I'm obviously worried about the town centre Aldi, about half a mile down the road maybe, whether or not that survives. Having a bigger one up the road, that worries me. I think this whole concept of out of town versus shopping versus in town is something that we must tackle in the next local plan. I do hope, and I'm not convinced, and I don't think I'm pleading to the new government around its comments on devolution, that they are actually devolution and not centralisation and not overruling local government as much as they seem to. I live in Vane, well, I hope in Vane, but let's hope they do something like that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Councillor Springett.
As I understand it, there was some confusion a few years ago on the boundaries between the existing shopping centre and the Kent Medical Campus. And I think that's where this problem has occurred, because that particular bit of land wasn't very clearly whether it was part of Newnham Court Shopping Village or the Kent Medical Campus. So on that basis, I'm picking up the concerns of Councillor Spooner, is not the land to the east of Gibbs Pond Way very, very clearly within the Kent Medical Campus map? In which case, can we not strongly defend any other applications that aren't medical related on the land to the east of Gibbs Pond Way? Because I believe there was an error or some confusion on a map, which is where this hole's been picked.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I should stress that we have asked for legal advice in view of the inspector's decision. But yes, our argument as officers was that there is a clear distinction on the proposals map between Newnham Court, as I call it, and the Kent Medical Campus. However, the inspector agreed with Aldi's King's Counsel, and I'm exaggerating a bit, almost relied solely on the policy wording. And like I said, I think behind that is, if the demarcation was so important, like I agree with you, Councillor Springett, why wasn't there a cross-reference? You know, as per the proposals map, land to the west is the subject of additional retailing. Land to the east is purely for the Kent Medical Campus or something like that. I think that was the sort of focal point of the debate. But we are seeking legal advice on it.
Councillor Spooner, last words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to sort of briefly comment upon something that Mr. Jarman was just saying. I'm sure we can debate for hours the conclusions of the KC operating for the applicants and about potential other uses and retail uses. But it seems to me this is all a matter of fact and degree. And some retail uses may be acceptable. You know, a small little shop selling flowers for people visiting the hospitals, you know, even a small coffee bar. But, you know, it seems to me that is at one extreme. The other extreme is a multi-thousand-foot square superfood store attracting thousands of residents, thousands of people every day who've got no interest in the hospitals, no interest in any of the other facilities there whatsoever. There's a big difference between the two. And I fear now, in the light of this decision, now we're going to attract more and more retail uses. I'm heartened by what Mr. Jarman is now saying about hopefully tightening up those policies in the local plan review. It's the only way forward. Thank you. Rant over.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spooner. There's no one else. I draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, councillors.